What is up, everybody? I am Mike Somich for RacingDudes.com, and I'm joined by Aaron Halterman here. We're going to talk about four horses that didn't fare so well in the Derby. But we're going to talk about their trips. Both of our picks are in this four, so we're going to take some shade here because neither of them ran that well. Talk about whether or not we want them out and what we think of them moving in the future. Make sure you check out the first video in this sequence. We went over Rich Strike, Epicenter, Zanin, and Mo Donegal in that first video. We're going to cover Messier, Taiba, Zozos, and White Abarrio in this one. So without further ado, let's jump into my pick, Messier, and see how that trip was. All right, so we're going to kick this off by watching the number 6 horse, Messier here, shipped in from California, came out of the Yak Team Barn here, and right out of the gate, it feels like John Velasquez got Messier out and got him in position early. Wish he used the clock in his head a little bit better. They're kind of flying up here, and Messier is right on that pace.
It's tough, right? Because when they break and you don't know how fast they're going, you're like, okay, perfect, good spot, yep. Exactly where I wanted him. And then I'll never forget it. You were standing right next to me, and they posted up that opening quarter, and you were like, "Oh no, this is bad."
This is exactly what I wanted from a positioning perspective. Yeah. Without that 21.78 opening quarter, because Messier saved all the ground on the first turn, sitting right behind two horses that had no chance of holding. You knew that Summer's Tomorrow. You knew that Crown Pride weren't winning from there. You had to love that spot that Messier is sitting in, and right outside is Zozos. We'll talk about him a little bit later. I thought before that first quarter and first half that Messier had a huge shot in this Derby based on the position.
Well, we'll talk about Taiba in a second, too. You can see him on the screen. I thought the same thing until I saw the fractions. I thought, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly where we want him. And you're right. It was a situation of, not using the clock, just saying, okay, I want third, yep. And then bam. And then this is a real crazy move on Messier. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was shocked when he split going into a 110-6 furlongs here. I mean, you're basically sending for home with over 4 furlongs left in the race and saying, I'm going to do these suicidal fractions. I'm then going to run into those suicidal fractions. And then I'm going to try and hold on for 4 additional furlongs when you have the best 3-year-olds in the country coming after you from the behind. And that's exactly what you see here. I mean, Messier makes the lead, and then you just see Epicenter and you see Zanin make him look like he's standing still. And at this point, right after, you can see John Velasquez, after he looks to his outside, he sees those two horses go by him, and he kind of wraps it up here. He knows he's done, and you end up finishing 14th or 15th. I don't think this was that bad of an effort to finish 14th or 15th in this field.
Well, I think it's just to draw a line through it. I mean, he tracked a 21 and 45 opening quarter and then split them at the 6 furlong mark, going 110. 110 wins a lot of 6 furlong races, and he's got to go a mile and a quarter. I mean, look, like you said, from a standpoint of positioning, and if that's in your head, if I just need to be third tracking these horses, well, Johnny V did a great job, but man, oh man, not ideal. Not ideal. He did not adjust like Rosario did that we talked about on the other video.
No, it was definitely one of those, this is where I'm going to be no matter what type situations, and you really wish he was further back. Like you said, this is a draw line through it for me. This doesn't tell me much about Messier, except he's really fast early when he needs to be.
Yeah.
And that, probably doesn't love being passed, but I think he was exhausted by the top of the lane. So I'm not going to take anything away from my opinion of Messier out of this race. I'm just simply going to say it's a line through. And we'll see what happens next time. I think he's an interesting one moving forward, especially if you get him at any type of price.
The frustrating thing about him before we move on is we've seen him rate pretty kindly off speed. So he would have done it. Like they would have asked him to do what an Epicenter did. He probably would have done it. I mean, you never know, but we've seen him do it before. So I don't know. That was a little disheartening. I'm sure for you more than me.
Yeah, I wish he and Taiba switched trips, to be honest, because I think that he would have done quite well from Taiba's trip, and that's a good transition into our next horse here, and that's Taiba, the 12th horse, who breaks out of the 12 post, third start ever, first time in a 20-horse field. Aaron, do you want to kind of kick this one off since this was your Derby pick?
Yeah, stupid pick. Next. No, I'm kidding. All right. So, listen, I'm watching him right here, and we're all praying for a break. A young horse, immature horse, I should say, or inexperienced horse. Break, broke perfect. And I'm like, all right, we're in business. That's step number 1. Step number 2, let's get him over to the rail or at least close to it and save ground. Look at this. Mike Smith, he's doing it. Then it all kind of just went to hell after that. He just didn't do any running. He's tracking it. And again, probably like you were feeling Messier, before I saw the fractions, I thought, well, that's kind of how I envisioned him running. Yep. He's in a great spot. And here he is. He's sitting there on the rail. He's saved all the ground here. He's up in a decent spot. But again, the fractions, he's running much, much harder than he's ever before early in the race.
Yeah, it's interesting. You also kind of see his mouth open there, and there's some foam a little bit coming out of it. So he's already pretty jacked up at this point of the race and not getting as comfortable as you might want him to be. You can see Epicenter sitting right behind him about a length back. So it's hard to make a full excuse. You see Mike Smith move him off the rail a little bit. That opens up for Epicenter there. I think this really shows how good Epicenter's race was. And this might have just been too much too soon for Taiba. And I think that was one of your biggest concerns with the horse.
The other problem is, without any doubt, you're right about that. It was too much too soon and underestimated that. And the other problem was he never really had kickback. And I didn't really think it would bother him, but you could tell he wasn't comfortable. He was throwing the head up and down. He just never got into that cruising speed that you've seen in his other two races. So then when they're asking him, and now Mike Smith's going to ask him for a little bit, there's no horse there whatsoever. Yeah. He had been kind of up against it, fighting the track, a little too close to the speed as well. And he just runs in place down the lane. I mean, he just didn't do anything at all.
So when do you think we'll see him again? I mean, I guess that's the main question with Taiba now. We didn't see him for a while after his first start. Took a while to work out after his second start. That was obviously a concern coming into this. I don't think those workouts were a concern, considering that they were almost identical to what he did before the Santa Anita Derby.
Yeah.
Probably needs some time off based on just what we've seen from him. Do you think Belmont is in the cards? Do you think we're going to see him next in California? How do you feel about Taiba's rest of his 3-year-old season here?
I would be surprised if we see him on the Triple Crown Trail anymore. I think they'll regroup. I think the goal of that owner was to get to the Derby. They did it. And I think they regroup at this point. There's no reason to push for the Belmont for this horse. I think you get him finely tuned and you point for the summer. And, whether that be the Haskell, the Travers, the Shared Belief out at Del Mar, something like that. But I don't think you'll see him on the Triple Crown Trail. There's just no reason to. You kind of pushed him to the Derby. It didn't go well. Now do right by him. Give him a little time, see what happens. I mean, a lot of people, including us, were like, well, shit, even if he wins, what does that mean for a triple? It's like, I don't know how he's going to compete in the Preakness. So it was just one of those things. It kind of, the bubble got burst. That's the best way to put it.
I would agree with you. I think he's going to have some time off, and I would love to see him in Saratoga, but I have a feeling he'll stay on the West Coast, just based on kind of what we've seen here. So we're going to move on now to a horse that you were high on before the post draw, Zozos, who's going to break out of the 19 post here. I want to tell us a little why you were high on Zozos, and then just kind of give us a little idea of what you thought about the early trip here for him.
Well, listen, he ran second behind Epicenter, who ran second in the Kentucky Derby. He actually started gaining on him a little bit in the Louisiana Derby. That was his first race against Stakes Company. He had great early speed. He's going to flash it here for the 19 hole. I just thought this horse was pretty solid, and he ran a mile and 3/16 and finished really strong. And honestly, after this race and after watching it back, I'm just as high on this horse. I thought this was a gigantic effort.
It's one of the reasons I picked this horse's trip. I thought he might have ran the second best race in the entire race, which is crazy to say for a horse that finishes ninth. But he's right where Messier is, except he's 3 wide. He's covering even more ground. He never makes the lead, and he ends up finishing ninth in this race. I thought this was a really good performance from Zozos, who is right on the pace, who's never able to save any type of ground, faces some kickback from Summers tomorrow. He's never going to win with this trip, never. And so you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt and say, hey, how good was this? How much ground did he lose to the eventual winner? You see he's able to go right on the inside of him. And how much more horse do you use early?
I mean, all of those factors as well. And a lot of people gave me crap because it's like, Munnings, there's no way. But when you see a horse run a mile and 3/16 and keep going, that kind of goes out the window for me. I don't really care about that anymore. Look at this horse. So Messier does his thing where he splits. He's still right up there. They're going to try to move him around the same time, And again, he's starting to retreat a little bit quicker because he's been wide, like you said, but he hangs in there. He doesn't quit. Epicenter, all these horses are starting to fly by him. This horse just keeps running. It's valuable to know for the next race because who's going to run with this horse early in a normal circumstance? He's going to be very tough to run down in his races.
I would love to see him be lone speed or one of 2 speeds next time out, and you get like 10-1 on this horse. I think this is one where you're like 48-1 in the Derby, ends up finishing ninth. I think this is a trip that people aren't going to realize how bad this trip was, and you may actually get some value back on Zozos next time. And often I don't take too much, the Derby's a grain of salt race for me. Like as a data point, I usually count it as like a fifth of a normal data point because of how many trips you have, the fact that there's 20 horses, the break, all that kind of stuff. For Zozos, this is a big eye-opener because I thought this was a really tough trip.
Well, and you saw there, he goes out of the picture because obviously he finishes ninth, but he was around a group of horses. And when you see him, he actually dug in and tried. Now, all those other horses were tired too, but he still tried to finish the race. Like, he was really trying. So, I can't say enough about him. I thought, wow, that was really pretty darn good for a ninth place finish.
Yeah, I mean, he beats Taiba, he beats Messier, beats White Abarrio, beats Charge It, beats Cyberknife. So I thought that was definitely one of the tougher trips for a good horse that we saw, and a horse that I think is worth betting back next time if we get any type of price on him.
Yep.
To wrap this up, we're going to look at the number 15 horse here, White Abarrio. And this is a lot because of just the general trip trouble he has. I mean, he's one of those horses that I was fairly high on coming into this. I was interested in the Florida Derby circuit. And he didn't get jostled early. He kind of got in the spot he wanted. You can see there he gets pinched a little bit between Taiba and Zozos there, and ends up here in about 8th or 9th place, I'd say, sitting 3 wide on this first turn, maybe 4 wide on the first turn. And that really was the key to his trip, right?
Yeah, he was wide throughout, basically. And on the final turn as well. He was another one that just never seemed like he really grabbed a hold of the track. I mean, look at him, kind of spinning out a little bit there. He was one that was a tweener as far as where do you place him, right? And when he drew the 15, that was a big problem for him. You mentioned that a little bit when the draw happened. He's not really fast enough to go out with that first group, but he's not slow and he didn't want to be last or towards the back. So he's just kind of, let's just get him in the middle. Well, when you draw the 15 in the Derby, a lot of horses want the middle, and that's what we were left with.
It was interesting. We went over Slim's pace thesis. There were 11 EP, early pressing horses, right? So there's a lot of yellow, and that's what you saw here. He is one of the slower early pressing horses, and that's where it really forced his hand to be that 4-wide trip, sitting in 10th place. And then when you see him come around the turn, the only 2 horses that are wider than him are Barber Road and Modonegal. So he's really wide in the second turn as well. Now, he doesn't do much running. I think that's the biggest knock on this, is that he never really gets it going, and he ends up finishing 15th or 16th in this spot, which isn't great. But he was wide first turn, wide second turn. Do you have any interest in White Abarrio back, or are you kind of over him?
No, I have interest in him for sure. It's all about dynamics, and he's gonna get a lot better situation and a lot better trip in his next race. He's another one. I don't think he was as good as Epicenter, Zandon. I'll go ahead and throw in Messier and Taiba, even though we know how they finished. But I saw him as like the 5th or 6th best horse coming in. I don't like downgrading to like the 10th best horse now. I think he's still right around in that range. So it depends on where he shows up, if I have interest in him or not going forward.
To me, like I mentioned with Messier, it's a line through it. Not really going to judge him based off this race. If you were high on White Abarrio coming into this, I think you have to be like, all right, well, he got a terrible trip. I'm just going to kind of draw a line through this. I'm going to still have a similar opinion of White Abarrio as to what I had prior to it, especially if he's a Gulfstream. We've seen how well he's done there. Be interesting to see what the connections do moving forward. When we interviewed him before the race, they were talking Preakness. When we talked to him, when we interviewed him, they were talking about aiming for the Pegasus, essentially, maybe skipping New York and running down to Florida. So it'll be interesting to see how they train this horse up, where they go to next, and what they decide to do with White Abarrio.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Like I said, with Safi, maybe Florida is the answer, to stay in Florida.
He's a Florida, New York guy. He generally does better in Florida, though, so I wouldn't be shocked if you're right. All right, thank you very much for joining us here for part 2 of the Kentucky Derby trip review. This time we talked about Messier, Taiba, Zozos, and White Abarrio. Make sure you check out part 1 with Rich Strike, Epicenter, Zandon, and Modonegal. Make sure you subscribe to the Racing Dudes channel here for more videos like this leading up to the Preakness, the Belmont, and then on to Saratoga and Del Mar. Aaron, thank you very much for joining me. We'll catch you guys next time.